Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I was sitting here, I was going to originally ask Representative Zerwas to rise for a question, but I don't really need to because I think you already know that the current law doesn't allow folks to be on the highway, right? You just want to increase the penalty. So I want to ask you to rise because I know you know that. But what I want to do for 1 minute here is take you through some history. So I'm going to read something about Dr. Martin Luther King on the Pettus Bridge, which was a highway. And I believe it's like 54 miles from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. And I would think on that day that they did this like 3 times to try to make it from Selma to Montgomery. You know this history, right? And I'm sure the highway was shut down. Probably ambulance didn't get through. Probably people had a whatever, right? And so the Selma to Montgomery March was part of a series of civil rights protests that occurred in 1965 in Alabama, a southern state deeply entrenched, a southern state with deeply entrenched racist policies. Deeply entrenched policies. In March of that year, in an effort to register Black voters in the South, protesters marching a 54-mile route from Selma to the state capital of Montgomery were confronted with deadly violence from local authorities and white vigilante groups. As the world watched, the protesters, under the protection of the federalized National Guard's troop, finally achieved their goals, walking around the clock for 3 days to reach Montgomery. The historic march and Martin Luther King Jr. participation in it raised awareness of the difficulties faced by Black voters and the need for a National Voters' Rights Act. And so when people are marching in this 21st century, this is not a joke. This is no one playing games. This is no one trying to stop an emergency from happening. It is about justice. It is about fairness. It is about being present and having your voice and your presence and your life matter. That is what the protesters is trying to help raise awareness about, an injustice that we as African American has felt for way too long. For way too long. And so when we talk about fear, a fear of a daughter who had to take a bus from the airport, you know the fear that I have to take every time my Black young sons get up and leave out of my home, that I hope that they will return back safely? That's real fear. In St. Paul, fortunately, I and many in our community have a very good relationship with our police officers. I'm not saying it's perfect, but we've built relationships. You know, we have a great police chief, but that is not always the case, and that has not always been the case. So when an unarmed Black man, boy, loses his life, the fear of a young girl and a young boy who has lost their parents, or someone who has lost an uncle, a brother, a nephew, that's reality. That's reality. And I'm having a hard time trying to deal with all the hypotheticals about what could have happened. What could have happened? what may have happened. Let's talk from the place of what is happening here. And I think that is what is important. In this place, in this body, where policies create practices that have kept a community like mine down. And I understand why the rural community don't get this. I understand why you don't get this. I understand why folks back home is having a problem with people standing up and having to protest and get in the highway to bring attention to injustices. That is not happening to them, or from people who don't look like them. But this is the history of America. This is a history. And we're tired of our black men being dispensable, of our uncles, our fathers, our cousins, our brothers, our nephews. These are real people with real lives. And if you have to become an inconvenience about that, well, just as Dr. King on that 54-mile journey, so be it. You become inconvenience, because we are inconvenienced all the time. All the time. And we have to navigate our way through this world. And so navigate your way from the airport to find a way to meet her dad. If that's the biggest challenge that she had to do, I only wish. Representative Newberger, I get a little disappointed when I hear, you know, as a first responder, an ambulance, you know, I get it, but to think that everybody on the north side have seen you, have had contact with, I don't know what you were saying there. I'm just trying to figure it out, but no, that is not true. And you made a lot of statements about trauma ones, you know, trauma center, getting to a hospital. You know how many black men and boys have died who never made it to a trauma center because they were shot dead in their place? People are tired and fed up of the injustices. They are like tired and fed up. And so when rural folks don't understand it, I get it. Because it's not you. It's not your life. It's not nothing you have to deal with. That's the reality that happens so much, so often in an urban core. That is what we have to deal with. And so when you look at this and say, well, you know, what if, what happened? Not one person showed up in a committee to testify. Not one law enforcement officer, not one. I'm going to make an assumption that, you know, maybe they planned this. Maybe they was in communication with the police who stopped the traffic, who can respect the right of individual to protest. Maybe that's why they didn't show up, because they knew what those protesters' job was and also what their job were. And that was to make sure that no one got hurt. Did anyone get hurt? I would say not. Besides someone, them agitators that come in from the outside. You know those outside folks that come in and mess stuff up? And throw bricks at police officers to make the whole thing look bad. So we stand up for this and we speak about this, not because it's a liberal issue. This is a human rights issue that we take very, very serious. Very serious. The right to protest is fundamentally part of our Constitution. And yes, some people will get inconvenienced. That's how we bring awareness to the injustices. Otherwise, you just stay in the comfort of your being and be oblivious to all the injustices going on with someone else. And so, it's my hope that the governor see this language and realize that this is more than about being on the highway, that not one police officer or anyone else came to testify in support of. And I hope that each one of you who look over here and say, you can't be on the highway, know that this is deeper than that. This is deeper than that. So I stand in support of Representative Pinto amendment to this bill and say remove it. And I'm just hoping you guys can vote in support of. Thank you.